The Dallas homestand weekend started off with a bang as the Paris Eternal and London Spitfire faced off on Busan. Paris looked incredibly strong at the beginning of the match. An early pick on Jaehee Gesture Hong gave Paris momentum to take the first cap on Mecha base. The Eternal were able to hold the Spitfire off for quite some time until Jun Ho Fury Kim managed to eat one of Soon's Graviton surges. This allowed the Spitfire to flip the point in their favor. Massive Earth Shatter from Jester would prolong the Spitfire's hold onto the point as well. With one fight left, the Eternal nearly managed to flip the point during overtime, but another fat shatter from Jester would halt them in their tracks. It would also cause the power to go out. Memes aside, once the power was back on, the match continued right where things had left off. On Sanctuary, Gray would find himself out of position, and an early pick from Seong Tae, Dozin Choi would have the Spitfire getting the first cap. From there, Gray would continue to make questionable plays. Random transcendences and focusing on kills would leave the Eternal weak and defenseless. Finally managing to get a pick on Bedozin, Gray would give his team momentum to take down the Spitfire. With a point at 88% in favor of the London Spitfire, one last fight and a wasted self-destruct from Nico would be all the Spitfire needed to take the point back. The London Spitfire would win Busan on a final score of 2-0. On Anubis, the Eternal would swap out Shadowburn for Danye. Immediately going into a bunker composition, the Paris Eternal would nearly full hold the London Spitfire. Both Danye and Soon were popping off the majority of their defense. However, an unfortunate pick on Danye would give the Spitfire the momentum they needed to overrun the Eternal's defenses. Taking point A during overtime, the Spitfire would rush on to point B. London would get continuous picks on the Eternal, trapping them in a looping stagger. An unfortunate Maywall from Nico would trap Cloudy, thus breaking the loop and allowing the Spitfire to cap the second point. Deciding to go on to a triple DPS composition, Paris would quickly blow through the Spitfire's defenses with Soon on Widowmaker and Danye on Pharah. After capping point A, Paris would swap back onto a traditional 3-3 composition. Unfortunately, the Eternal would not be able to break through London's defenses. They were constantly being wiped out by Fury, Jester, and Junyoung Prophet Park. An incredible stagger on Nico would have the Eternal press for time for their final fight. With the clock ticking down, Soon would throw down a Hail Mary Graviton surge that the Eternal would not be able to capitalize on. The Spitfire would take Anubis on a final score of 2-1. King's Row was a mess of a map for the Paris Eternal. Prophet would outsnipe Soon on Widowmaker the second the spawn doors opened on King's Row. From there, Prophet would gleefully switch back onto Zarya as Soon changed to Junkrat. Favoring another bunker composition, the Eternal would refuse to get onto the point and they essentially gave the Spitfire point A. The Spitfire would then roll through point B, and it was not until Cloudy managed to get a shatter on the Spitfire's backline that London lost momentum. However, the Spitfire were quick to regroup, and they pushed the payload to the end of the map with ease. On the attack, the Eternal would favor a triple DPS composition with Nico on Sombra. They would methodically poke their way onto point A with Nico harassing London's backline as Danye pressured London from the front. This worked to their advantage, and Paris was able to cap the first point. As the Eternal pushed the payload, London would attempt to initiate a team fight at the choke point between the pub and the alleyway. Danye would wipe out Jester and Prophet using a rocket barrage, and the Eternal would be able to push the payload through to point B. Losing momentum though, Paris would only be able to push the payload to the end of the map in overtime. The Eternal managed to quickly cap point A during the second turn on attack, and the Spitfire would be able to hold them at the choke after getting key picks on Cruz and Gray. During the Eternal's second chance at defense, Soon would once again get outsniped, this time by Gesture. That pick caused Paris to panic, and the London Spitfire were able to take King's Row on a final score of 5-4. The Eternal were the first to defend on Junkertown. Prophet was able to get a key pick on Cruz, but Danye's Widowmaker would have the Spitfire scrambling. Getting pick after pick, Danye forced the Spitfire into a looping stagger. A great EMP from Nico would allow the Eternal to wipe out the Spitfire. Nearing overtime, Paris was almost able to full hold the Spitfire on the first point. However, unfortunate picks on Soon and Gray gave London the momentum they needed. London would sail through the second and third points despite Cloudy's best efforts to stall. On attack, Paris would do their best to run Pirate Ship. For a moment, it seemed like it would be able to work. With Suna and Cloudy setting up on top of the wreckage, they were able to continually take down the Spitfire as they pushed the payload to point A. Unfortunately, Pirate Ship would not work for long. Once Danya was taken out, the Eternal swapped back onto Goats. Unable to break through the Spitfire's defenses, Soon would do his best to get into the backline and push the payload, but he would be continuously denied. The London Spitfire would take Chunkertown on a final score of 3-1. Going into this matchup, many fans predicted that the Eternal would struggle. However, fans did not think things would be as bad as it was. The Paris Eternal looked lost this entire series. Having Nico instead of Fincy was a confusing move for the Eternal. While one can give Paris props for trying to be more flexible with their compositions, refusing to swap back in their actual off-tank when Cyber Goats was repeatedly not working for them. Going into their next match against the Spark, the Eternal would need to go back to the drawing board if they want to walk away from Dallas with a win under their belt. The London Spitfire swept the Paris Eternal on a final score of 4-0.